Look at any group of people around you, whether it's a marketplace, a dormitory, or the hallway of a school. They are all essentially the same. They share the same basic structure. The same blood flows through their veins. We are all connected to the same evolutionary lineage. Despite this, one person's skin can be as dark as night, another's light pinkish white, another's golden yellow, and another's reminiscent of olive oil. And this has become so ordinary that it no longer seems strange to you, yet it ought to seem strange. Because if we are all the same species, all from the same place, and possess similar biological energy, why do we look so different? And more interestingly, this difference is not merely aesthetic. Skin color directly affects how we survive. Your mother never taught you this. There was no lesson about it in school. But people have been trying to find an answer to this question for centuries, and the answer is hidden right there in your color. To understand it, however, we need to go much further back, deep into the depths of history. Before cities were built, before the invention of writing, nearly to the very beginning of humanity. Think about it, right in the middle of Africa, roughly 2 to 3 million years ago, our ancestors set something in motion. Over the course of years, through a gradual change, their hair disappeared. Slowly, generation by generation, the thick layers of fur that covered their bodies were shed one by one and vanished. This sounds very strange, because fur means a shield. Fur means warmth. Fur means protection from the sun. Why would a creature evolutionarily lose it? The answer is heat, more precisely, releasing heat outward. When a furry animal runs long distances across open terrain, its body temperature rises and it is forced to stop. But a nearly hairless creature can cool itself through sweating. And sweating is a remarkable mechanism. The body removes heat as water evaporates. This means a creature can walk without stopping, remain constantly in motion, pursue massive prey, while other predators rested in the shade. Our ancestors could keep moving. Back then, this was a tremendous advantage, but this advantage came at a cost. With the absence of fur, the skin came into direct contact with the sun. The skin was now left exposed, and the sun in Africa's equatorial belt was not kind. It carried ultraviolet radiation. UV rays damage the skin. They can disrupt DNA, and they can break down folate. Folate is a B vitamin you may have never heard of. The body's folate levels are essential for producing new generations, for repairing DNA, for supporting the early stages of pregnancy, and for healthy sperm. If there is too much UV and folate breaks down, reproduction becomes difficult. And in evolution, reproduction is the core of everything, no matter how strong, how intelligent, or how fast a creature is. If it cannot pass on its offspring, evolution does not preserve its structure. It is that simple. So, how did our bodies respond to this? Melanin was synthesized. Melanin is the substance that gives our skin its color, but its capacity is not limited to that. It is also a biological defense system. It absorbs and disperses ultraviolet rays beneath the skin tissue, acting as a kind of interceptor. The greater the amount of melanin, the stronger the protection. This is why populations living close to the equator, whose ancestors were exposed to intense UV radiation, developed bodies that produced more melanin. Dark skin was not the result of some aesthetic ideal. It was a continuation of the struggle to hold on to life. It was our first natural sunscreen, and this system achieved extraordinary success. But then people migrated. This is one of the key turning points of the story. The species Homo sapiens began leaving Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago, heading north toward the northeast, to Asia, toward Europe, to colder geographies, where cloudy skies dominated and where winter sunlight was short-lived. Moving away from the equator brought a new problem. The danger was no longer excessive UV exposure, it was insufficient UV exposure. More precisely, the problem was not getting enough UVB. UVB is the type of light used in the synthesis of vitamin D, and vitamin D is indispensable for many fundamental functions of the body, for calcium absorption, for bone formation, for the functioning of the immune system. A child deficient in vitamin D may develop rickets. This disease causes bones to soften and become deformed. Bones become more fragile. The chances of survival diminish. Now think about it. Dark skin works wonderfully under strong UV rays, but when the majority of UV is weak throughout the year, high melanin can become a problem. It was there to block UV. But now it is also blocking the small amount of UV available. The body could not produce enough vitamin D. For this reason, natural selection began to favor lighter-skinned individuals in the north. Less melanin allows more UVB to pass through. More UVB means more vitamin D. More vitamin D means healthier bones and therefore a more successful reproductive process. Light skin did not come from the cold. Temperature does not affect skin color. What changes is the amount of UV. This is why human skin evolved according to UV maps rather than temperature maps. When we examine this map, everything becomes much clearer, but the story does not end here. Because humans display an irregular pattern. Some communities living near the Arctic Circle developed quite dark skin tones despite living that far north. Why? Because the traditional foods of those regions consist of fish and marine mammals. And these foods are extremely rich in vitamin D. If vitamin D is available in the food, the skin's limited northern capacity no longer needs to absorb more sunlight. In other words, dietary habits can influence the evolutionary pressures on skin color. But none of it appears to be entirely simple. Survival has never been achieved through a single factor. The components of solutions and the relationships between those components are in constant interaction. This is the point where the concept of race begins to unravel, because differences blend gently into one another across geography. No sharp line can be drawn. There is no magical dividing point where one human ends and another begins. There are only communities that have been exposed to different levels of sunlight, different distributions, different migration routes, and chance. If you had traveled from Central Africa northward thousands of years ago, you would not have seen a single abrupt change in color. You would have witnessed gradual transitions, bodies shaped by the sun, guided by needs, blended by migrations. Human differences are real, but the structures humans have woven around them are largely cultural. Skin color became one of the most visible human differences, so societies loaded it with meaning. Then those meanings were built upon. They were reinforced through acts of violence. But evolution said none of this. Evolution was solving a chemistry problem, blocking enough UV to protect folate, allowing enough UV for vitamin D production, a delicate balance. The entire complexity of the matter lies in this structure, and the solution to this problem was found in different places through different means. The light skin of Europe and the light skin in parts of East Asia may not have arisen through exactly the same genetic changes. Evolution had achieved similar outcomes using different tools. This means there was never a single moment in time when people were simply white. There was never a single moment in time when people were simply black. These are far older and far more slowly progressing processes. Biology came first, categories came afterward. The first Homo sapiens were most likely dark-skinned compared to many people alive today, because our species evolved in Africa under intense UV radiation. But even this must be handled carefully. They were not black in the modern social sense. They were ancient humans adapted to intense sunlight. The categories emerged much later. Biology came before them. The sun is treated here as a subject with dangers in two directions. Excessive exposure damages folate and DNA. No exposure at all prevents vitamin D production. Melanin is the balancing mechanism. As UV intensifies, melanin production increases, and as it weakens, melanin decreases. The reason one color is not superior to another is not that one is better, but that different characteristics are required for different needs. For this reason, no human skin tone is a perfect starting point. The existing tones are the results of processes of adaptation. Dark skin carries no primitive inferiority, light skin carries no advanced superiority, and a middle tone is not an incomplete condition. All have succeeded in surviving under difficult conditions. But the modern world has altered the balance these tones were brought into existence to maintain. Today, people can travel from one end of the planet to the other in a matter of hours. Someone whose ancestors evolved to live under the weak northern sun can now be exposed to the scorching intensity of tropical regions. Similarly, someone whose ancestral genetics adapted to intense tropical UV radiation can live in cloudy northern climates. Our skin color carries the legacy of the conditions in which our ancestors lived, but our lives are shaped under very different circumstances. Our bodies adapted to these new situations, but the data of our lives is not as limited and fixed as it once was. Perhaps this is the most striking point of all. Our skin color is perceived as a permanent feature. It is identified with identity, family, and history, and in reality, it is. But it also contains a fluidity. Our skin color is perceived as a permanent feature. It is identified with identity, family, and history, and in reality, it is. But it also contains a fluidity. Our skin, beyond being merely a color, carries the traces of ancient migrations, crossed deserts, followed coastlines, endured winters, and people whose names have been erased. It is a continuation of the experiences of people who lived without knowing they were shaping the face of humanity, who lived only long enough to raise the next generation. Written across generations as permanently as anything that can be written. As for why human skin colors differ, there are a few fundamental reasons. First, the efforts of our ancestors to spread across different geographies and survive there. Second, the fact that the same star that created us, the sun, is both our source of life and something that can sometimes harm us. Third, evolution being forced to solve two problems simultaneously, protecting the body from harmful rays while also receiving enough light to synthesize vitamin D. This diversity of color is not a list or a sharp boundary. It does not separate people as singular, isolated beings. Thanks to this, humans can live in nearly any climate, forming a single whole as a flexible species capable of adaptation. This spread, which began with changes in Africa, reached the four corners of the planet and gave rise to a species carrying the traces of each new sky it encountered. Its skin tone tells the story of a struggle for survival. That color itself is like a map, and today, that ancient-looking piece left by human ancestors is carried in the skin of their descendants. Our bodies hold a past far deeper and older than we imagine, and this story is not yet over. Subscribe now for more videos like this. In the place where humanity hides, there is a beautiful secret.